And just to bring you an update on that story, in the last few moments, President Trump has posted on his Truth social media site saying, after a long night of talks mediated by the United States, I'm pleased to announce that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire. The president goes on to say congratulations to both countries on using common sense and great intelligence. So as I say, that's announcement by President Trump in the last few moments on his Truth social platform, saying that after a long night of talks mediated by the US, he's saying India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire. Now, we should say we haven't had any comment yet from either the Indian or the Pakistani side on this story, but you see it there from President Trump posting on his social media platform just in the last few moments. These hostilities, of course, have really escalated in the last few days following this militant attack at the end of April, in which 26 people were killed. But in the last few days in particular, things have really gone up a notch with missiles being sent between either side. Let's bring in our correspondent in Islamabad, Azadeh Mashiri, on this breaking news. Azadeh, we're just getting this in the last few minutes. What more do we know?
Well, we knew before this that the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had spoken to the chief of the army here, General Asim Munir, and then later on in the day had spoken to the foreign minister of Pakistan as well as the foreign minister of India. And what he had offered both of them was America's help in starting what he called both constructive and productive talks. And so now, as everyone was wondering how this could end, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has made this announcement on Twitter that there has been a full and immediate ceasefire that has been agreed between India and Pakistan. But I do need to flag that there still hasn't been an official statement from either government. And so this is only coming from President Donald Trump right now. But of course, it would be a serious development in that that's what world leaders have been urging for both countries to engage in de-escalation, to show maximum restraint, as the United Nations had put it. But in the early hours of the morning here, when people were waking up in Pakistan, it seemed like that was quite a long way away, in that the Pakistani army had claimed that 3 of its military bases were under attack and that it was launching what it was calling Bunyanun Operation Marsus, which means iron wall, as a counter-offensive is how it put it. So this would be a significant development.
OK, Azadeh Mashiri for us in Islamabad. Thank you very much. And just to remind you, if you're just joining us, President Trump has posted on social media to say that after a long night of talks mediated by the US, he's pleased to announce that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire. As Azadeh mentioned there, we haven't had any comment from either Pakistani or Indian sides. And actually, I think we can go back to Azadeh now, who may have an update on that. Azadeh?
I do, because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Pakistan, just as we stopped speaking, put out an announcement on X. The foreign minister has tweeted that Pakistan and India have agreed to a ceasefire with immediate effect. Now, the statement goes on. He says Pakistan has always strived for peace and security in the region without compromising on its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, I'm sure much more is about to come out as I'm speaking to you, but that is confirmation, at least from Pakistan, that a ceasefire has been agreed with immediate effect, is what he said. Now, remember, both countries have accused each other of having started this conflict. It all started a month ago when there was that attack in Indian-administered Kashmir, in Pahalgam, where 26 people, mostly tourists, were killed. India at the time blamed this on militants that it believed were based on Pakistani soil and therefore held Pakistan responsible, whereas here officials and the military firmly denied this and had been calling for an open investigation. And so that has been one of the most difficult sticking points, is not only were India and Pakistan not speaking to each other, but they were continuing to trade claim and counterclaims, accusing each other of targeting civilian areas, denying it both. But it seems like today there has been a significant breakthrough, though, again, it's worth waiting to see what India says.
Azadeh, as you say, it's early moments. We've not heard from the Indian government yet. We are seeing a few lines dropping on the Reuters news agency from Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. He's saying over the last 48 hours, J.D. Vance and himself have engaged with senior Indian and Pakistani officials. Azadeh, talk us through how crucial the US has been in this.
There was always a question around this, about which countries would be able to exert the maximum amount of influence. India, of course, has a strong relationship with the United States. Pakistan has had a strong relationship in the past. It's weakened over recent years, but Donald Trump and officials here and people in Pakistan mention this a lot, that in his State of the Union address, he mentioned Pakistan and counter-terrorism efforts. So there seemed to be some sort of rapprochement there. But the real question mark was about whether the United States wanted to intervene, and if they did, by how much, because this is a White House that in general has seemed to focus more on domestic issues, hasn't wanted to get involved in conflicts abroad. In fact, J.D. Vance in an interview on Fox a few days ago had said that he sees this as a long-running issue between India and Pakistan. But clearly, given the events of the last 24 hours, given the fact that this conflict seemed to be on this never-ending scale of escalation, they decided to take more action. And as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the State Department had announced, they had been having these calls with both countries. Again, we haven't heard from India the last time I checked, so we do need confirmation from them on how these discussions have gone, how they view any sort of agreement. But as far as the United States and Pakistan statements, it seems a ceasefire has been agreed.
Azadeh, we're also seeing Marco Rubio saying that talks will take place between India and Pakistan on a broad set of issues at a neutral site. Now, this is an issue between the two countries over the disputed territory of Kashmir in particular that goes back 8 decades or so. This is one of the more recent flare-ups. Talk us through some of the particular flashpoints we've seen over the last few days.
Well, over the last few days, it was particularly when it came to the night of the 6th of May, when India said it had launched several airstrikes on what it was calling terrorist camps, terrorist infrastructure within Pakistan. And those had targeted not only Pakistan-administered Kashmir, but also the province of Punjab here in Pakistan, which was seen as reaching far deep into Pakistan itself. And again, I have to flag that while we're talking about flashpoints, we're not talking about who started this conflict, because that's really at the heart of this dispute and why it's been so difficult to find an off-ramp to this. And so just recently, just a few hours ago, both India and Pakistan had been saying, and they've said this to the BBC, you've spoken to the Indian High Commissioner and the Minister of Information here in Pakistan, both were saying, if the other stops, I'll stop. Both were accusing the other of targeting civilian areas. Both were denying it. And so there have been constant flashpoints, if anything, this week. But putting this week aside, putting the events of Pahalgam last month aside, this, as you say, is a dispute that is long running. It has lasted decades, ever since partition. And these two countries have fought 2 wars over the issue of Kashmir. They've also fought limited conflicts over it. The last time there was a serious escalation was in 2019. And at that point, both countries, nuclear states, managed to avert an all-out war. And the question was, would they this time? Because as many people here in Pakistan have told me, as I've been going to markets and speaking to residents to get their sense of what they feel about all this, they've described it to me as the worst conflict they've seen between India and Pakistan in decades.
And so, Azadeh, that announcement then of a full and immediate ceasefire will just be a huge sigh of relief to the many civilians in the area.
Definitely, and depending on where you travel, people view this conflict very differently. In cities like Karachi, Lahore and Islamabad, people have told me they're not very much afraid. They haven't been, because for people who have been living in Pakistan, Pakistani people here, this conflict or any tensions between India and Pakistan, it's the reality of living in this region. And so they're used to it. I haven't met anyone here in the last few days has told me that they're scared. But that very much changes when you speak to people near the line of control. One resident in the last few days who lives in Pakistan-administered Kashmir in the area of Lipa told us on several nights that they've been jumping into bunkers. Their neighbors have been doing the same because of the crossfire across the line of control. And even they said they weren't scared, they were anxious, because they said the first time that they had heard a bullet was when they were a child. It's the reality of living so close to the line of control. But they did say that they were worried about how this would end, and that the firing had been more intense than they'd heard in years.
Azadeh, these talks that Marco Rubio mentioned, which will take place at a neutral site, looking at the geopolitical makeup of the region, what other countries could they potentially involve?
Well, that is up to India, Pakistan and the United States, so I can't quite speculate on who they invite. But of course, another country that is very important to all of this is China, who also administers a part of the disputed region and is seen to be an ally to Pakistan. China has a lot at stake when it comes to Pakistan's safety as well. It has a multi-billion-dollar project in the province of Balochistan, which has to do with mining and critical minerals. And China also has provided weapons to Pakistan. So in recent days, they have called for de-escalation. Their statements have never gone so far as to criticize India per se, but they have made it very clear that de-escalation needs to happen. And that's something that's been echoed by other countries, as well as the United Nations. Secretary General Antonio Guterres did call for maximum restraint earlier in the week.
If you're just joining us, you're with BBC News. We're bringing you the breaking story that India and Pakistan have agreed to an immediate ceasefire, a full and immediate ceasefire. This came to us first in a post by President Trump on social media, saying, after a long night of talks mediated by the United States, I'm pleased to announce India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire. We then heard from Pakistan's foreign minister also confirming that, and we've seen the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the same thing, a full and immediate ceasefire between India and Pakistan after several days, several weeks of violence, and saying that talks will take place on a broad set of issues at a neutral site in the coming weeks. On the line with us is our correspondent Azadeh Mashiri, who's joining us from Islamabad. Azadeh, let's reset here. How big a deal is this?
It's extremely significant because as many world leaders had been reaching out, urging restraint, calling for both countries to de-escalate the conflict, it didn't seem to be happening. And more than that, India and Pakistan didn't seem to be communicating. Yesterday, at an army press conference, a spokesman said that neither of the country's national security advisors were in touch, even though that line of communication is crucial when these countries are going through tensions. They've used that line in the past during previous conflicts. And so now, after what seemed like a never-ending cycle of escalation, the two countries exchanging drone and artillery attacks, claims and counterclaims, it seems that diplomacy might be holding. Now, again, we haven't seen a statement from India, and I think that's really important to say. But very soon after Donald Trump, the President of the United States, announced on X that there had been a ceasefire that had been agreed with immediate effect, Pakistan's foreign ministry and its foreign minister made a very similar announcement. Now, we don't know the terms of that ceasefire. We don't know how India views this. But either way, it's a huge breakthrough after a night where people in Pakistan in the early morning were waking up to news that their military had launched an operation against India, and India was claiming that it was also facing an unacceptable incursion. So when it came to finding an off-ramp to this conflict, it was very hard to see one.
Azadeh, this is a full and immediate ceasefire, according to the US and Pakistan. As you mentioned, we have not yet heard from Indian officials. That means hopefully missiles stop going across the borders for the next few days at least. But regardless of that, this area is tense. Talk us through the tension around Kashmir and the fact that we see troops from either country lined up alongside the border regardless of a ceasefire.
Yes, and India has claimed some troop movements, which Pakistan has completely denied. What has been happening, and both countries have acknowledged in recent days, is aside from the strikes and the drone warfare that we've been talking about during this conflict, there has been heavy firing across the line of control, and both countries have acknowledged civilian casualties on their ends. They dispute each other's numbers, they dispute each other's the areas that each other attacks. But it is true that there has been a serious conflict along the line of control. And again, and we've talked about this, Kashmir is a very heated issue between these two countries. It dates back all the way to partition in the late 1940s. And so for India and Pakistan, when it comes to any sort of flare-up, there's always this possibility of a dangerous escalation. And remember, these are two nuclear states that should act like a deterrent, but nevertheless, it means that world leaders are going to take any flare-up, any escalation, extremely seriously between these two countries.